All right, welcome. We're here today at Lake Raven in northern Georgia, and we're going to just take a moment to talk about incorporation and the pros and cons for incorporating your real estate business into an entity other than you individually. So the first reason is, why would you incorporate? And really your reasons are threefold. One, you incorporate for a mindset reason. Two, you incorporate for a legal risk mitigation purpose. And finally, a reason to incorporate is tax savings. So on the mindset side, I would say that's most important. When you set up an entity, in the eyes of the law, that entity is as distinct from you as you and I. It's considered its own person in the eyes of the law. And I think that's a very valuable way to think about your business as you decide to start building a real estate business. Now you're building something separate from yourself. The law treats it as something totally distinct from you. And that's a hugely valuable sort of mindset to get in, of my business is over here, it's not me, I'm building the business, I just am a component of building a business. Because frankly, when you're a 7th level agent, that's how it is. Your business is separate from you, and you don't want to be all tied up with it. So there's a lot of value, in my opinion, of from the get-go setting up as a separate entity. Now the next reason is a legal risk mitigation. You know, because your LLC or your corporation or whatever you create is totally separate from you, it has its own sort of rules that it's following and laws that it needs to follow. And if it breaks the law, or if it's in a breach of contract with a vendor or employee of something, there's walls. It's isolated to itself. So the fact that you're the sole owner, that you have a lot of assets that have been generated from this business is for the most part irrelevant if you've kept that corporate walls up. And it's not going to be treated, it's not you, it's its own thing, and any sort of legal judgment that happened with it stay with the LLC, distinct from you. A lot of value there. Now the last thing is, there's ways to set up taxation with an entity separate from yourself that can yield huge tax savings to you as the agent. We're talking about money in your pocket rather than money in the IRS, something we always recommend. So those sort of are 3 primary reasons for setting up an entity separate from yourself. Now, what are your choices? In a real way, your choices are an S Corp, a C Corp, or an LLC. Now, an S Corp and a C Corp really are the same thing. It's a corporation that's set up. One is just the IRS has been told that it's going to be taxed as an S Corp rather than a C Corp. Now, a C Corp is where the term double taxation comes into play. A C Corp files its own tax return, pays its own tax, and then when the profits are distributed to the owner, so the agent in this case, it's subject to dividend or taxed as dividends at that point. So it's taxed twice, once at the corporate level and once on the personal level. And for that reason, a C Corp almost never makes sense, which leaves us with an S Corp or an LLC. Now, in a real way, we're talking about a corporation or an LLC, because from a tax standpoint, for almost all agents, an S Corp taxation is going to make the most sense. And both an LLC and a corporation can elect to be taxed as an S Corp. So why would you choose an LLC over a corporation? The primary answer is simplicity. It's a little bit easier. A corporation has corporate formalities it needs to follow, things like an annual meeting where those meeting minutes are recorded, a board of directors, and if you don't follow those rules, it can be used against you in certain lawsuits. Now with an LLC, all you need to do is set up your LLC, pay your annual registration statement, and that's it. If you do that thing, your entity itself is going to stay intact. Now, both of these are taxed slightly different. So a C Corp at default taxation is taxed as a C Corp. As I said, that double taxation comes into play, versus an LLC at default is taxed as a sole proprietor. So how 95% of real estate agents are taxed right now, at default, that's how an LLC would tax you. Now, both a corporation and an LLC can elect to be taxed as an S Corp. And basically what's going on here is the whole world looks at it and sees an LLC or a corporation, except the IRS. At default, the IRS is seeing a sole proprietor for the LLC and a C Corp for the corporation. But if you file this form 2553 with the IRS, it essentially says, this entity is now going to be taxed as an S Corp. So now the whole world looks at it and sees an LLC or a corporation, except the IRS. The IRS looks at the LLC and sees an S Corp, or they look at the corporation and see an S Corp. So something they're the only eyes that view it differently. But an S corp has a lot of benefits from a tax standpoint, which we'll get into later videos. But that's the gist of it. Please let us know if we can answer any specific questions. Entity is something I'm a huge proponent of, and if you're a new agent today saying, what should I do? I'm a little confused. I would say create an LLC, continue to be taxed as a sole proprietor, but you can get in the mindset and the habits of doing everything as you need to, and when the revenue justifies you switching how you're taxed, you can make that jump. So again, please let me know if you have any questions, and we look forward to talking.